planetary consciousness. What is it not, and why is it going to change everything in the coming years? Watch this video to find out. All right, folks, planetary consciousness is a term that's thrown around a lot in spiritual circles, especially where it kind of originates from. And yet, many people, don't really know what it means. Even the ones who are using it, it's not really clear what it means. There hasn't been a really rigorous philosophical development of the term. And yet, it's very important to know because we are going towards a big shift, a civilization-wide consciousness shift in the coming years, which is to do with a specific astrological constellation that I'm going to tell you at the end of this video so you understand. And this shift will make planetary consciousness extremely important for all of us, for all of human civilization. So we should start thinking about it. We should start talking about planetary consciousness. What is it and what is it not? In this video, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to tell you exactly what planetary consciousness is and what it's not. We're going to go through the different ideas which are related with this concept, and we're going to get closer and closer to get a full picture of why planetary consciousness matters. So make sure to watch this video till the end. Now let me start off with a personal story. For myself, planetary consciousness, when we talk about this concept, is something very near and dear to me. When sometime around 2012, the big consciousness shift that happened, for me personally, it became very clear that my main identity and allegiance is to the planet as a whole and all its denizens. Now you may say this sounds like very woo-woo or crazy or whatever, but it is actually far more common today amongst a certain type of open people or people that have very complex backgrounds, which you find more and more in today's world, to have this view. Let me explain. I personally, my roots are from northern Iran. The Caspian Caucasus region is where my ancestral roots stem from. However, I didn't grow up in that country. I grew up in Germany. And then afterwards, I lived basically my entire adult life, largest part of my adult life, in the Anglosphere in UK and Canada. My wife is Brazilian, which by extension makes me a Brazilian. Eu sou brasileiro também. And now we are in Southeast Asia, where we're building a community for spiritual seekers, for other planetarian spiritual seekers. So if you ask me where my allegiance is it, I could be paper-wise, I could be German, Iranian, I could be Brazilian, I have family in Canada. Is that my identity? No, my identity is not limited to a particular ethnic group or to a particular block, to the world blocks that are currently emerging and kind of facing each other off that we're seeing in the world. And you have to pick sides. You got to put on either a red hat or a blue hat, and then we're going to go and fight, and we're going to get into this battle on the global stage. For me personally, it's not something that I primarily want to see my allegiance and identity with, even though that does not mean that you cannot have, that I don't have, a strong connection to the various parts which make up the mosaic and the background that composes me. I think a lot of people in today's world are like this. They have similar feelings, even though they have a strong connection to the different parts that make up their particular makeup. Yet there is an emerging layer on top of that, which is planetary consciousness, the consciousness of being at home on planet Earth, being connected to the planetarian community first and foremost, right? Think about it. Aliens, the UFO sightings are going exponentially through the roofs. Aliens are going to come here. They're not going to ask you, are you with this side or that side? Are you with this people or that people? They're going to see all of us as humans on Earth, right? And this shift needs to happen within us personally so that we're ready for that chapter, right? So we're ready for that chapter. But now let me make very clear at this point, because there's going to be a misunderstanding. People are going to say, oh, is this globalism? No, it's not globalism. Globalism is actually the perversion of planetary consciousness, right? Globalism is the opposite. Just like wokeism is a perversion of awakening, of true spiritual awakening. In the same token, by the same token, globalism is a perversion of true, authentic planetary consciousness. Now, let me explain why. And this is the first point, where we're going through the points that make up planetary consciousness. First, it's not globalization, right? Globalization is a requisite, obviously, right? What is globalization? So it's the interconnection of the planet, first through economic routes, right? Which happen, trade routes everywhere in the world, and then through the internet, right? Internet, we all now share the same information, communication channels, but this is a requisite. Without it, we wouldn't be able to have this conversation right now. But globalization on its own is not yet what we're talking about. It's not yet planetarian, right? So let me explain. Globalization, pretty much after it took off in the 90s, it was turned into this political agenda, a political agenda driven by elites, by oligarchic, plutocratic elites, the transnational elites in the Bill Clinton era, who were and became what is called today globalists, right? And the globalists, they see basically the world as this market, integrated market, where their plutocratic groups can benefit from open trade relations while they're abusing and extracting the resources from all global traditions, and while they're destroying the authentic traditions of the various peoples of the world. So, that's your McDonald's and Coca-Cola spreading all over the world and making the world kind of this playing field for the BlackRocks of the world, right? That's globalism. And it's George Soros and the World Economic Forum and those people, right? This is obviously not what planetarian consciousness is. Planetarian consciousness is not against traditions. On the contrary, in planetarian consciousness, you can keep your traditions. You can keep your authentic traditions, right? Whether that's your ethnic traditions, your clan, right? Or your family traditions, whether that's your religious traditions, right? Your spiritual wisdom traditions. You can keep all of those. Planetarian consciousness does not destroy the authentic traditions like globalism does. Globalism makes a level playing field for the plutocrats to extract, right? So it's not globalism. That's the first thing. The second point, and this is an interesting one, because partly this point is actually part of planetary consciousness. The second is Gaia Theory. Gaia Theory, right? So this is a theory. It was developed by scientists James Lovelock and Lynn Margulis, right? Biologists by trade, by background, and systems theorists. And they developed this theory that Earth is basically a living organism. All of Earth, everything that happens on Earth, all the biological processes that happen on Earth, all of the minute processes of life, right, which happen in multiple ecosystems all across the planet, they cohere into this emergent property, which is Earth as a living organism, right? So Earth itself is basically an animal, if you will, an organism, right? It's a higher organism, right? Obviously not what we would think of the 5 kind of kingdoms of biology, but it's a higher emergent kingdom, right? Biologically speaking. And this emergent property of Gaia, right, of the living Earth, has a consciousness of its own, right? It has a consciousness. It processes information. If consciousness is, at least partly to some extent, an emergent property of information processing, then Earth has a consciousness, right? And this consciousness of Earth is part of planetary consciousness. When we talk about planetary consciousness, developing planetary consciousness, we are talking about plugging back into that consciousness of Earth. So this wouldn't be obviously without precedent. All we need to do is we can look back at the shamanic cultures, the shamans all across the world. That's what they do, right? They connect with Pachamama, they connect with Earth, the living organism, right? Bring the spirit back into tune with the living Earth. They get information and guidance from Earth. So that's partly part of planetary consciousness, but it's not yet full. It's not yet fully explanatory, right? It's not yet sufficient. Necessary but not sufficient, right? So we're getting closer. What else? The next thing that we have to consider is a level higher, okay? A level higher, namely when you move from the Earth intelligence to Earth as a being or as a systemic part of the solar system, then Earth within the solar system also could be considered to have some sort of intelligence. This is the idea and the thought of planetary spirits, planetary intelligences. This is what in the Hermetic traditions, the Gnostic traditions, the astrological traditions, right? The astrological traditions of the world, they have been speaking about planetary spirits. So Saturn has a spirit, Venus has a spirit, right? Mars has a spirit. By that same token, Earth has a spirit, right? And this intelligence is basically part of Earth's functioning as a node within that network, right? Within that cosmo-neural network of the solar system and the planets together, right? And their harmonic motions together. So that level is actually one that's important. And I'm going to show you something here which allows you to understand, because on that level, we have a certain type of archetypal structure. We have messages, we have structures that are informing our lives. If you have dealt with astrology in any way, right? And I do a lot of astrology here, right? So you will know, if you're here already because of that, you will know if you're dealing with astrology, right? Ancient spiritual science of astrology, which is getting more and more discovered now as the science of synchronicities, you know that the planetary signatures and their rhythms, they play a role in our lives, right? In everybody's lives. And having that understanding and that intelligence, being able to read those intelligences, even communicate with those intelligences, right? Being able to see those intelligences in everyday life is a capacity of higher intelligence, which is part of planetary consciousness. And I'm showing you here something right now that you can see on your screen, which is a insight into the ultra sapient Nineplex, the Nineplex, which is a model for understanding the levels of conscious reality. And in this model, you can see, which I'm going to explicate far more in coming videos and go really deep into this. This is the most advanced system, 21st century system for an integrated and dynamic understanding of the levels of consciousness that you can use not just to understand, but also to develop and evolve consciousness with. And in this model, you can see here, we have the higher levels of consciousness, the Akashic and archetypal levels of consciousness, right? Which are basically the levels on which we have planetary influences, the astrological planetary influences, right? So this is also part of planetary consciousness. It's basically becoming aware of the fact that planetary signatures, astrological signatures, are part and parcel of our existence and of the flow of existence that we all live in, okay? Now, the next part, this is not all. The next part is that planetary consciousness is also a stage of conscious evolution. Sounds similar, but it's not the same, right? So stage of conscious evolution. A lot of people have looked into this, a lot of philosophers, people like Hegel, all the way up to Ken Wilber. You can look at spiral dynamics, John Gebser, people like that. They have talked about levels of conscious evolution which are historical. So for instance, you have mythic consciousness, right? In all the way back in the ancient peoples, right? Before the rise of the great empires. Then you have in the medieval times, you have a very strongly traditional religious consciousness. Then you have the emergence of modern consciousness, rational consciousness, right? In modernity with liberalism and the explorers and everything, right? The Galileos of the world and the Copernicuses. And then you have the emergence of postmodern consciousness in the 20th century, where everything is questioned and everything is kind of dissected from every perspective you look at it. And then even beyond that, you have the emergence of integral or planetary levels of consciousness. So for instance, in Ken Wilber's model, those are the teal levels, the higher tier levels of consciousness. And those are emerging today. So more and more people share the kind of experience that I outlined at the beginning of this video, where their own personal identity framework and the parameters within which they can understand reality are larger than the previous generations historically would have access to, right? They're thinking on a planetary scale, on a planetary level. And that's planetary consciousness as a historical development, right? Something that evolves over history, for which globalization was necessary as a prerequisite. Because globalization happened, all the interconnections happened, now we're able to get more and more people develop planetary consciousness, right? They can travel, they can see stuff, they can, evolve, and they can overstep the boundaries and limitations which previously maybe kept their ancestors locked within certain parameters and paradigms that allowed them to explain reality, right? So all of these converge together into what is planetary consciousness. In planetary consciousness, we have basically a historically evolved stage, right, which is currently starting. More and more people are coming into it. It's still a small minority globally, right? But more and more people are starting to come into it. We have an identity, marker, a marker of identity and allegiance, which, again, it doesn't replace your allegiance, your identity in nation, races, and so on, right? It just supersedes and includes, right? Transcend and include the previous levels, right? You still have those, but you have like an additional one as well, right? Which is even more inclusive. Identity, right? It's an emergent property of the organism of Earth as a living being, right? It's a cosmic property of Earth as a solar creature, as a solar being within the solar system, right? Integrated in cosmic harmonies and cosmic cycles, right? Higher intelligences. And all of these come together to give you what is planetary consciousness, right? And now I can get to what I said in the beginning of the video, that the big shift that's going to happen, which is going to change everything. And it's not far now. It's not far, right? What is this big shift? We are going towards a massive constellation, astrological constellation. It's a harmonic constellation of Neptune, Uranus, and Pluto, which is exceedingly rare, right? 250 years, something like that, was the last time when this happened, right? And then again, 200 something years before that. Like, it happened at the shift from the medieval to the modern rationality. We had this constellation in place, right? I had done other videos where I explained this. And this constellation is coming in now. And this constellation stands for civilization-wide consciousness upgrade. And that's going to happen over the next years. It's starting now. We're part of this right now. The fact that we're having these conversations right now is part of this consciousness upgrade on a civilization-wide level, right? But it's going to be a process. It's multiple years. Starting now, it goes all the way till the end of the 2020s, right? The end of the 2020s. And then you will only have had basically the shifts in people and in the institutions. It will still take a long time to trickle down to the institutions and to the masses and to everybody. It will still, initially, it will be in a small number of people. That's always how it is. There's a small number of people who first kind of become part of the new consciousness, right? And that's one, the Uranus-Pluto-Neptune conjunction. Constellation, not conjunction, right? The Uranus-Pluto-Neptune constellation. And the next one is Neptune is going to be in Aries in the coming years. It's entering in Aries in late 25. And it's going to be there for multiple years. And that stands for, astrologically, for the emergence of new worldviews and new philosophies and new movements, spiritual movements, right? That's going to happen over the next few years as well. So these two, bring them together and you understand why the planetary shift, why the shift towards planetary consciousness is going to be so huge in our lifetimes, in the coming time. Neptune in Aries also stands for the emergence of movements, right? Large movements. Movements where that consciousness and that philosophy actually becomes something that can change the world, actually becomes something that takes on the power structures of the world, right? And think back again, who is the main enemy, the opposing planetary consciousness? There are two. One, it's the globalists, right? The globalists, because the globalists, they don't want all sentient life to rise in consciousness. They don't want all of us to rise in consciousness. They want a small plutocratic elite to maintain control through technologies of control, right? They don't want everybody to rise in consciousness. It's globalists, number one. And number two, sectarians. Sectarians. Those who say that, no, my religion is the only true path. Everybody else should die. Those who say that, no, my race is the only true race. Everybody else should die, right? Everybody else is subhuman, right? The sectarians, the ones who want to partition humanity into parcels that don't communicate and don't commune on a consciousness level with the rest of humanity, right? The sectarians, they're the second enemies of planetary consciousness. The globalists are far more powerful today, far more powerful. So I'm naming them first, right? Now, there will be a movement with Neptune in Aries in the coming years. There will be a movement. The philosophy and the realization of many will start to turn into movements. And I have named this movement, this emerging movement, before it has even emerged, I've named this planetarianism. Like, planetarianism is different to globalism. Planetarianism is a movement where people are part of something they create to change the world towards being a place in which planetary consciousness is the guiding principle for planetary redesign, for redesign of our lives, right? Of our communities, of our lives, of our existence. So all of this, you can learn about more if you now, first of all, obviously subscribe to this channel and hit the notification bell. There's going to be far more on this. Also go on Ultra Sapient XYZ, ultrasapient.xyz. When you go on this, when you get this, everything might be up there already. And if it's not, at least you can put down your email and you can be amongst the first people who unlock and understand together the higher levels of consciousness. Because we need to come together to explore those. We need to come together to co-create and co-ideate and co-intelligently and co-live together in that intelligence and with that intelligence that is the emergent planetary consciousness. So I invite you to do so. I'm Dr. V, and I wish you all the best. Be blessed.